Obsidious, formerly Technis Kor-Se-Vak, an agent of the SKA clan, was presumed dead after discovering an Aeon repository in a treacherous region called the Zombie Nebula. These hidden chambers, believed to contain ancient Aeon artifacts, turned out to be an arsenal where the Aeon locked away dangerous alien weapons. Among them was the Dread Scythe, crafted from the ebony bones of a dragon-like creature called a Voidreaver. Upon touching it, Kor fell under its influence, becoming bonded with the scythe. It granted him chitinous obsidian armor and the ability to manipulate space-time, but only by consuming the souls of his victims.
Welcome back. Today, we are going to be looking at a very new line of action figure. And this one I've been waiting for quite a while. This is the Legendari line made by Meta Travelers. And the pre-order, I believe, started way back in 2023. And finally, the figures got delivered this year. Honestly, I need to applaud these guys because they did not account for the tariff and all these complications, and there were a lot of problems during production. So much so that there were some of us that were pretty sure that they were going to go bankrupt or just announce that they were not going to be able to make the action figure. But they came through in the very end. They came through, and I am very glad that they did. Reviewing something that, like the previous video when I did the Taguro or some of the like holy grails from my childhood, those are fun because those are figures that characters that I grew up knowing and have a certain anticipation and expectation for. But there's a certain amount of charm when you're reviewing a brand new original line of toys where you really have no expectation. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what you're getting. Uh, the only thing that I knew about these guys was they were uh, involved in Guardians of the Galaxy, and the sculpts and stuff like that would be being handled by Four Horsemen. So that made me trust that it was a very good team of people working on this project. Now, I will be honest that when I looked at the character lineup and the stories and stuff like that, it wasn't really my jam. The characters were more sci-fi than fantasy, and ever since I sold off my Star Wars collection, I kind of distanced myself from collecting sci-fi figures. This is why I don't even really collect cosmic legions, even though I'm a big fan of Four Horsemen Studio. But I drew the line at cosmic legions and focused on mythic legions. Although I do have a few of the creatures from cosmic legions that would actually work in with your fantasy stuff. So when I looked at this Legendary line, I wasn't too impressed by the selection because most of the characters and their bio and stuff like that just too sci-fi. They were not going to fit in with anything I have. But in the end, I did pick up two uh, characters. I picked up the Pale King, which we will review later, and I picked up Obsidious, which we are looking at right now. As his bio suggests, Obsidious was a normal person. Well, I mean, I don't know how normal he was. He just said he was a member of whatever clan, and he went into this cave and found a bunch of alien artifacts. And then he came across this Dread Scythe, this big honking scythe, I'm assuming, which is like the bone of some kind of dragon like alien creature. And when he touched the scythe, it turned him into this, right? Like, ouch. I think the moral of the story is don't touch things that you don't know about, especially when they're alien artifacts. So now he is covered in chitinous obsidian armor, and he got turned into this demonic horned creature with like a skull like head, and he has the ability to manipulate space and time. Although I'm not quite sure what that's supposed to mean. Like, does that mean that he can warp reality? Does that mean that he can teleport? Um, like, what does that even mean? But I think this is a fun part, right? When it's a brand new concept like this, a brand new line, a brand new character, it's up to you to how you want to interpret what information you have. So, in order to keep himself going, he has to devour people's souls. So basically, he is a rocky obsidian monster, grim grim reaper kind of character. I mean, that's pretty cool. Okay, so this is why I picked him out of the lineup, because unlike most of the other characters, he's not overtly sci-fi. He definitely can fit into a more fantasy lineup. If you want some kind of stony obsidian demon on your shelf, I think he's a pretty good fit. I mean, there are some elements that still kind of uh, a little bit more sci-fi than anything, because his color is a little bit green, silver, gray. I'm not quite sure. When I took the photos and AI described them, some of the photos they said AI said he's silver. Some of the photo AI said he's green. So I'm a little bit confused. Maybe you guys can let me know what color is he actually. Um, and he has he has a kind of a space armor ish kind of almost robotic kind of uh profile outline. Like, he's very blocky. Is what I'm trying to say. This this is like something that you can see fight a Power Ranger or something like that. But there again, I mean, for me, I can see him fighting your Dungeons and Dragons and Mythic Legions as well, as long as you allow a bit of uh, leeway. And then this is a very weird kind of demon, maybe from a different dimension and time or something like that. He is about seven. Well, actually, he's exactly 7 inches tall, and um, construction-wise, he's very similar to Mythic Legion mixed with Cosmic Legion. You can definitely tell there's a lot of Four Horsemen influence here, with a chunky proportion. Although I will say that the most chunky part is really his head, and that too is very similar to Four Horsemen stuff. Like, a lot of Four Horsemen stuff have really big head. Sorry, excuse the hand there. Um, yeah, so it's like got this big chunky body and big head, and then his arms and legs, honestly, are a little bit on the small side. At least that's my the way I feel. Like, when you look at the proportion, he's got relatively slender, scrawny limbs, and this big chunkster torso and big head. Right? And that makes it, especially when you put the scythe in his hand, that makes him a little bit hard to balance sometimes. The Dread Scythe is very interesting as weapons go, because this is very organic feeling. Like, it's see how it's all twisted, and there's kind of like a is that like a animal head on the top there. It kind of feels like it should be, and then yeah, the whole thing just feels like some gnarly, spiky piece of bone uh, that turned into a big weapon, and it is really large. Like this is the scythe next to him. Right? This is how big the scythe is. But the most interesting part of this figure is not even the scythe. I think the most interesting thing is the cloak he comes with, and we're going to look at that in a little while. But first, I want to take a little bit of time too and see, look at all the textures on the figure. Like this figure, even to a blind person, you will immediately be able to tell it is some kind of rock creature. Like even if I didn't know his background, even if I didn't know what he was supposed to be, the moment I put my hand on him, I would think rock. Like he has a very rocky, very jagged, blocky texture all over him. His legs, hands. One thing I think is very interesting about Meta Travelers with their Legendari line is that most other companies, Four Horsemen, Harbinger Studio, um, Brutal Realm that is coming up, and the more Warriors of the Kingdom. Most other companies you can name that make independent figures, they start off with a very generic buck. Because they start off with something that uh, can be reused again and again and again. But in the case of Legendary, they chose this very alien, very blocky, uh, two-toed, three-fingered body shape that, yes, it works for a lot of these characters initially, but you just know that eventually they have to make something like they can't just keep reusing this because this is very specific, very unique, very recognizable kind of body. This is not something totally generic. Like you stand this guy on the shelf among your Mythic Legion and Savage Crucible and Masters of the Universe, he is not going to blend into the background. He is going to be that very unique character just by design alone. And I think that is very refreshing. Now I want to show you guys the cloak because, like I said, that is the highlight of this figure. Um, but before we do that, let me cut here, and then we'll look at some posing photos, and then we'll come back for the next segment. Obsidious comes with 4 pairs of hands, which include a pair of more flat, open palm type of hands, a pair of clawing hands, a pair of weapon gripping hands on vertical hinges, and a pair of fisticuffs. That's quite a few hands. And in addition to that, he comes with a removable hooded cloak, which has a lot of posing wires in it that I think the cloak really is a highlight of the figure. There's also a removable loincloth and chest piece, but I think those, they came on the figure. I don't really count them as accessory because without them, the figure kind of doesn't look complete. And then of course there's his main weapon, the Dread Scythe, which is a huge weapon taller than himself. Overall, the accessory count seems okay, but a little bit chintzy considering it is a almost $70 figure on Big Bad Toy Store. Articulation wise, he's a bit of a disappointment. He really reminds me of the older style Mythic Legion figures where the arms and legs can barely hit 90 degrees and a lot of the joints just don't work well together. So he looks like a piece of brick and poses like a piece of brick. Oh yeah, and he stands exactly 7 inches tall. Alright, so continuing where we left off, here is this huge giant cloak with a hood. Okay, the texture is interesting. If I were going to describe the texture, it's very crinkly, and honestly doesn't feel very premium. Like this feels like almost like paper. The texture on this cloak. I mean, the quality of the wires and all that stuff is really good, but like this has a let me bring it closer to the microphone. When I move the cloak, it makes that papery noise. Okay, like this feels kind of like paper, and to put the cloak on him, it's very easy. Uh, you pop the head off. Ow. Personally, I like to get the head inside the hood. Oh yeah, by the way, while I have the head off, I want to show you guys the jaw is articulated, but it's very loose. When I first got the figure out of the tray, the jaw actually was like half broken off, half fallen off, like the hinge came loose. But if that happened, you can just smoosh it back in and it will attach, right? But whenever you start to move the jaw too much, it will come off. So that is there's a bit of a quality control issue there, and we'll talk about it because this figure definitely have quality control issues. Um, so, like I said, you get the head into the hood like this. This is where I'm glad I am blind and I don't have to rely on my eyesight because I can totally do this without having to look. And then you line the peg up with the head, and yeah, it's on. And then you adjust the hood. There's even wires around the hood, and that will hang nicely. And now we have Obsidious as how he's meant to be with his hood and cloak. And this cloak make him almost look like a spawn. Like he's almost like a hell spawn. Very, very cool. The hood tend to float up a little bit. So you do have to adjust that from time to time. But once you pose him and then you adjust the hood, then everything should be okay, right? And then as you can see, there's all these bendy wires, all these strands, tentacles, like filaments, things that come off the cloak that you can pose however you like. And I'm going to show you guys one thing that I do with him that I personally think is kind of cool. If we bring Obsidious closer to the camera, you'll see that on his loincloth, on the bottom of his loincloth, there's this almost horn or fang-like thing that create a loop there. And then on the back, there's also another loop on the back of the loincloth. Okay, so I'm not quite sure if that's just something they do for design. Like what is that really for? Like were they did Meta Traveler have some purpose in mind for those attachment points on the loincloth? But what I like to do is if I want to say pose pose Obsidious with his hands free so he can uh, like maybe do some like spell casting poses. I'm not going to switch his hand because that's just a little bit extra annoying on camera. But here is one of his clawing, open clawed hand. You can see. So I like to pose him with an open hand because he looked extra vicious in clawed poses. But then you have to think, okay, what do we do with his scythe? It's such an important part of the guy, and then what are you going to do with the scythe? Well, this is what I do. Okay, see at the handle, the tail end of the scythe, there's this little hook piece. Okay, so what I do is I'll hook this through this attachment point under his loincloth, and then I'll use a bandy wire, these little tentacles on his cape to grasp the scythe. Okay, so look at that. Now his hands are free, and then his scythe is just like held up by his cloak. I mean, that is really, really cool if you ask me, right? So, like I said, there's an attachment in the front and there's attachment in the back. So, depending on how you want to pose him with his scythe just floating around him, you can do that. I don't know if that was meant to be that way, if that was a design choice like that they made, but that's something that I find very useful. Now, another thing that's really useful with these attachment points, and now we're going to talk about the one of the most annoying aspect with this action figure. Now, I don't want to go too harsh on this because, like I said, it's their first forte into the action figure making. And even though it was sculpted by Four Horsemen, but yeah, like Meta Travelers, they're very new and they did have a lot of production issues going into this. So I want to cut them some slack, but I still want to address this figure articulation really sucks. Like, uh, it's like those old action, the Mythic Legion figures with a bit of improvement in the body going forward and back. That's good, but as you can see, like if I hold him up and shake, the waist is super super loose. I really don't like that. You shouldn't be able to tremble the action figure like that. Okay, so that really can use some work. The knee bend, there's barely any bend in the knee. Okay, that you can't even get to 90 degree. The elbow bend, you can't even get to 90 degree. There's no butterfly joint. Uh, so this figure is hampered by articulation problem. Like the joints are there, but they're not super functional, which is weird because when you think of it about it, with a human, like an organic human figure, uh, then you have to worry about the articulation breaking up the scalp. Then I can understand why articulation is limited. But on something like this, where it's like basically a rock creature, in or an armored creature, you can cut the articulation a lot deeper, and I mean it would just look like part of the rocky sculpt. So there's no reason why the articulation should be like this. Another problem with the articulation is the wrist are very loose. Like the wrist tend to spin around. Like yeah, see how I can just make the figure spin like this, just holding onto his hand. Yeah, like and this is problematic when you have a giant weapon like the Dread Scythe here, because when you try to pose him with a scythe, unless you rest, yeah, you use a two-handed pose, or rest the scythe on his body, it's going to do this. It's going to spin around. Okay, this is not cool. Okay, so you kind of have to like rest it like this on his head, or balance it on his other hand like this. Um, Otherwise, it's just going to droop. This is where again this attachment point on the bottom of his loincloth can come into play, because if we just take the take the end of the scythe and hook it there, now he can hold it up, no problem, and he still looks okay, right? Again, because he is very top heavy, especially with the scythe, so standing him up can be a bit of a problem, especially with loose waist joints and all that stuff. But once you get him posed, he does look really, really imposing, right? So he's not very fun to play with because of the loose joints and not functioning joints, and also this chest piece falls off all the time. It actually, yeah, I'm not sure if they meant for him to be able to put another thing there, but honestly, personally, I just want to glue that in because this pops out all the time. In the end, uh, he did not wow me um, like a lot of figures that are in the $60 or $70 range. But as a first attempt, as something that is brand new and original, I would give him a very solid 7 out of 10, just on design and on what you get in the box and this nice, really cool wired cloak. I vaguely remember there's a Four Horsemen figure that might have a cloak like this. I think it's Vorgus Vermilius the second, but I don't have that figure handy right now. So maybe some of you can confirm that for me. Was there another figure that Four Horsemen produced that might have used a very similar cloak, or maybe even the same cloak? Now let's look at some nice comparison shots with him and various characters, and we'll have my final words on this Obsidious from Legendari. Unlike my previously reviewed Yu Yu Hakusho Toguro figure, which suffers from being too small because Toguro has a very specific size to him, this figure, Obsidious, is an original character that have no previous history to hinder it, so he can be whatever size you want him to be. Tip him against your 5-inch, 6-inch figures, he'll be a massive, threatening monster. Tip him against your Mythic Legions and Savage Crucible, he'll be basically human-sized but still looks very threatening. He can go against Batman or Spawn or anything you want, because he is all up to your own imagination on how big he should be. Thank you for checking out today's review. If you like more of my content, please remember to subscribe and like and share, and check out my blog at johnnytigerexperience.blogspot.com.